A good teacher has no entity of his own. He is rather the creation of the minds of his students. And a good teacher presents himself as clay and allows the artists in front of him to shape him the way they want to. I speak of this on the basis of my experience as a student and as a teacher as well. I was 22 when I started teaching, and I believe it was too early for me to teach. That is why I decided to remain a student, and I started learning how to teach, not from a teacher, but from my students. Once I was teaching Pride and Prejudice to my students when a visually impaired student expressed his inability to grasp the imagery in novel. It was quite challenging for me to find a solution for this problem on spot. And this is what made me think of finding ways to address such issues in future. I therefore decided to remain a student in the guise of a teacher, and I kept learning how to teach from my students. My students also taught me that a teacher's role is not limited to classroom only. And in this context, there is a very interesting incident. Once I was lost in some pleasant, romantic thoughts. I told you I was 22. When a student of mine rushed into me and he told me that I was a fabulous singer for him. When I asked him the reason for this, he told me that I was singing loud enough to be audible to the people around me. And fortunately or unfortunately, these people were my students. And this is the point where I realized that I, being a teacher, was observed by my students when I was least aware of it. And this is what made me realize that my students have an eye on the teacher on campus. In order to know more about the students' perspective on teaching, I surveyed 5 different universities of Pakistan, namely Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, Karachi University, Government College University, Faisalabad, University of Engineering and Technology, Lahore, and National University of Science and Technology, Islamabad. 75% of the selected students in these universities expressed their dissatisfaction with the current teaching practices. They favored more space for students and less authority of the teacher. And unfortunately, they also expressed their disbelief in teachers' evaluations because they found such activities futile. And this again made me realize that students have a decisive force to channelize my skills as a teacher. And that is why I propose that the students' voice not only be heard, it should not only be heard, but respected too. And one more thing that I learned about students was that they were not dummies sitting in front of teachers and trying to inculcate anything that comes from a teacher. They rather can question and challenge the teachers at many points. And this is what made me believe that students must be visited and revisited in so many contexts. So, for this, I propose that a teacher should try to connect himself to his students by understanding their language. And language is not words only. It is body language, gestures, postures, and eye contact. And language, since you know, is slippery, it can deceive you in many ways. It can convey the meaning that you don't want it to convey. And in order to avoid this, a teacher should enable his students to master the appropriate use of language. And once they know the use of language, they should also be taught to have questions and frame questions in such a language that they may seem questions and not blames. But in order to do this, a teacher should not let his personal insecurities hinder the smooth progression of teaching and classroom activities. And for this, he should take his students as his companions with whom he can learn and he can make them learn as well. And if he realizes this, he can build a beautiful relationship with his students where there is mutual respect and value for each other. But in order to attain this respect, in order to create this sort of relationship, and in order to nurture this relationship, he should also let his students believe in themselves. He should not challenge his students, and he should not either be challenged by his students. He can be questioned, and he can question his students. And in order to achieve this beautiful relationship and strengthen this relationship, what I do is that I break the already set societal structures. I try to provide my students a cultureless class where they can forget the cultures that they have come from in order to live in a culture that they have created. And by forgetting the cultures that they have come from, I do not mean that they'll be disconnected from their ethnic backgrounds. What I mean is that they can depersonalize themselves and learn more objectively in classrooms. And on the basis of this scenario, they can learn how to respect their class fellows. And they can then develop such a class where every individual is respected for his views, and nobody is excluded from this classroom. And by doing this, I try to provide my students a classless class where students can assimilate themselves without resisting to a new class, a class that transcends the already existing classes in society. And by doing this, I do not again mean to disconnect from the classes and culture that they belong to. What I mean is that if they can come to a class and they can create a culture of their own and they can develop a class of their own, they can be more confident. They can learn how to coexist, and they can learn that there can be a strong possibility of two contradictory approaches being right at the same time in their respective contexts. And if a teacher can make them learn this, he can also tell them that if they want to create a new world, they have to do it while living in the present one. And for this, every student should be told that the picture that he is creating is going to a particular scenario. It may mean something different to different audience, and it can matter to the people in their own contexts. But what a teacher is supposed to do is that he has to have a plan for placing every student's individual picture in a particular scenario. And if he can do this, he can do one valuable thing, and that is he can link education to the world outside. He cannot make education something disconnected from the world outside. And if he can build this connection, he can provide his students conducive grounds to work in their idealism. He can make his students learn that there should be a balance between idealism and practicality, because this balance is a key to success. And when students lose this balance and they have ideals which are not practicable enough and relevant enough, they are disillusioned. And in order to save students from disillusionment, and in order to save students from embarrassment when they step outside university campuses, a teacher should be well updated, and he should be learned that the world outside needs such things, and those things he can provide to his students. And now, if he can do this, he can again build a relationship that I was talking about with his students. And this relationship is something that is the ideal of a teacher if he wants to be loved by his students, and if he wants his students to be loved by the world outside. And this cannot happen if I don't believe in my students. And this cannot happen if I don't let them paint the way they want to paint. And if I don't let them question and revise their questions, and know their answers and revise their answers. And this cannot happen if I, being a teacher, don't let them know my failures with the fear of losing my ideal image. And if I, being a teacher, don't let them have pride in the fact that their teacher is the entity that they have created. Thank you very much.